Hello, fellow stalkers. Thanks for stopping by. Today we're going to be talking about something that hasn't really been covered on, by my knowledge. I'm going to just cut right into it. Today we're talking about cut content from Stalker 2. Now, a lot of this is very iffy, and it honestly could even get this video taken down. We'll just have to see. But we don't really have a clear answer on what is cut content or not, as with Stalker 2 being a very rushed game, we don't know if it's a completely cut feature or content, or it's going to be future DLC, or it's going to be implemented in the future. So I know a lot of people are probably going to disagree on a few of the things that we cover on this video, as a lot of our sources are either from leaks or from the Stalker art book, design documents, stuff like that. But I'm just going to be honest, and I'm just going to put it this way. As of today, where this video is posted, if it's not in the fucking game, it's cut content right now. That's just the best way I can put it. So let's just all agree on that right now for the sake of this video, and let's talk about it. Alright, enough exposition on this. Let's just dive right in. Our first topic of today for cut content is going to be mutants, which honestly is one of the worst parts of Stalker 2. But all that aside, let's talk about it. Stalker 2 actually has a huge array of cut mutants. Like, these are really cool concepts, and they're not in the game. Our first example of this is the Kadaavver, a mutant only seen in the Stalker 2 art book. In the documents, it's stated to be Project X's attempt at creating the perfect super soldier that apparently went horribly wrong and created this horrifying thing. Now, what it does, we don't know. We could theorize that it probably is similar to like the likes of the controller. Either that, or it causes some sort of explosion or stuns the player, as you can tell by the weird apparatuses or attachments on top of its body and things like that. We don't know. Judging by the way it looks, we could assume it also probably has some sort of strange camouflage as shown in the artwork. We can't really tell what that is. Or it probably just runs around and just screams a whole bunch. A cool theory of mine is that this is kind of GSE's take on the Russian sleep experiment. As you can see, he looks like he hasn't gotten much sleep, and that whole story's main gripe was creating a soldier that didn't need sleep. So that's my take on it. We don't know anything else. All we know is that it is in the Stalker lore, as it's mentioned that it is a campfire tale. I don't think there is an actual voice line in the game. There might be. I might be wrong on that. But hey, even if it's confirmed to not be in the storyline or in the lore, who gives a shit, okay? So it's pretty cool. The Mutated Beaver is another rodent mutant. It's stated that they got rid of this because there was, quote-unquote, too many mutant rodents in the game, but I think that's bullshit. I'm pretty sure they just ran out of time. Who could blame them? But it pretty much was just a mutated beaver. Its gameplay probably would have been like the Toscano, but instead of being more offensive, it's more defensive. As the cool thing about this mutant is that it had a quest associated with it where you had to obtain Gauss rifle parts. Now, we don't know if it's the fact that you're building a rifle or if you're building an attachment. It seems that it suggests that it's some sort of upgrade to the Gauss rifle. But basically, the Beaver would make several dams out of random scrap metal, with Gauss rifle parts being one of them, apparently. And it would create nests that the player would have to look for, things like that, and that it might have been in the Iron Forest. It could be assumed that it was in the Duga. Now, this is sort of leak territory, as this is something I saw, so I don't know if I want to share too much on this. But apparently Duga was going to be way bigger, and here's the crazy part. Doctor's house was supposed to be behind Duga, not in the Mirage, in the Red Forest. And around the borders of where Duga was, there would be a beaver dam. Now, we don't know if that's true. I just saw that it was listed on the map that there's a beaver dam, and that was a translation, so it could be fucking anything. But yeah, that's pretty much what we know for the beaver. Maybe it could have had something associated with Gonta, since he's a mutant hunter, or trapper. We don't know. It could be any of the two. But that's pretty much what we know of the beaver. Now, if you're an OG Stalker player, you're going to know exactly who this is. This is the Islam. Yeah, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But to those of you who don't know, the Islam was a mutant that was cut back in the early days of Shadow of Chernobyl, pretty much Oblivion Lost. Back when there were just zombies and there was an X-Plague and stuff like that. The Islam was pretty much an old man who was kind of messed up in the head, probably due to all the psi radiation or the radiation itself, stuff like that. But it's pretty much an old man who would just mutter random things, kind of like the zombies, and would just charge and attack at the player. And it was cut for obvious reasons, you know, it's just a very slow enemy. You already got the snorts and stuff like that, what's the point? And the zombified stalkers. They didn't really make the gameplay interesting. Now, Stalker 2 was going to bring them back. The only difference was they wouldn't attack the player by charging at them or hitting them. They would throw objects at the player and probably slam the ground like the Pseudo giant with their giant arm. Stuff like that. They had a bit more of ranged attacks. One thing you'll see with a lot of these cut mutants is that they experiment a lot with ranged attacks, which I think Stalker is one of the things that it, you know, peaks at, as a mutant charging at you and just stunning you over and over and over again is pretty annoying. It's not difficult, it's not fun, it's just tedious. And the thing that Stalker, you know, mainly benefits from is what the whole fan base loves, especially all the Gamma players, ranged attacks. You know, fighting enemies from a distance, trying to figure out where the damn thing is, things like that. You know, it creates a sense of like panic, stuff like that. And you're gonna really see a lot of these mutants were toying with that, as a lot of Stalker's mutants were just, you know, they're wildlife. And that's one thing I kind of see Stalker 2 toying with, where they're making mutants the main focus instead of just the wildlife and fauna, it's a cool concept. They just need to tweak it a bit more so you're not getting stunned. It's either that or Skiff's just a fat fuck and he needs to stand up faster. Now, this next mutant, you couldn't really call it cut content as it wasn't listed in any of the books. It's only in the Stalker 2 board game, so it could just be a concept that was toyed around with, never meant to actually be in the game. And thank God. I think this looks fucking horrifying. I wouldn't want to ever fight this, you know. People always say, you know, I want to go to the zone. I wish the zone was real, you know. The zone life would probably be pretty cool, aside from all the horrors. But this draws the line for me. If this is one of the ways I can die, hell no. So, other than that, this is the Mite or Tick. We don't know anything about it, honestly. All we know is that it's, like its description states, it's a horrifying enemy to behold, and it scares even the most veteran stalkers. Now, where it was supposed to be encountered, my guess is honestly either the swamps at dawn, burnt forest, or Duga, as you could see it in a lot of interior areas. You know, it could have been spotted in the X labs, but what kind of animals would it feed on in there other than small rodents? Well, that actually would make sense, but I don't see it to be too plausible. But we don't know much about it. We know that it might have nested, it might have been in several groups. It would climb on the walls, possibly, you know, a cool gimmick for gameplay, but it'd probably be really hard to code in, if I'm gonna be honest. So, even though it would probably take a long time for them to implement this, I'm kind of thankful for that, as I don't think I would want to see this taking, you know, all my memory as I'm trying to fight it on my computer. This next mutant, if it really could be called a specific mutant, it's more mutant variants, are the fake pseudo giants or fake giants. Now, I really like this idea. All we know is that they're different mutations of a giant, and they probably just attack the player, stumble around, probably throw stuff, the usual deal. But I actually do really like this approach for mutants, as not every mutant has to be perfect. You know, the whole thing about these mutants is that they're failed experiments. You know, like the pseudo dog could be a perfect hunter. It's like the chimera. It's a perfect apex predator, has 2 hearts, stuff like that. But, you know, there were failures. So you could see things like this where they're just mutated beings that are not perfect, and, you know, they're really weak. They're not really good at surviving. They'd be easy to kill. Stuff like that. It wouldn't really make the gameplay more interesting, so to say, but it would make the game more immersive, as these are horrors of, you know, brutal experiments, if you know what I mean. You know, what I'm saying is it'd be immersive to see in a game about horrible experiments, horrible failed experiments that don't really serve any purpose, but are just there suffering, walking around, things like that. Kind of like how the Islam was in the earlier stages, where it was just a man who was a little coherent, but he still was suffering and he couldn't really do much. The zombified stalkers are a good example of that, but we don't know much about the fake giants other than they're just, I guess, failed pseudo giants. This next mutant is rumored to be named the Filnic, or the dust monster, something like that. It was possibly another cut mutant. We might see it again, or, you know, implemented. And by its description, it was apparently a mutant you'd see in the X labs, where it was created during an experiment with artifact exposure, apparently, something like that. But its main gimmick was it would like shoot dust clouds kind of at you that would damage the player, or it would attack you. I don't really remember, but its main gimmick was that you could shoot portions of it, and even though it would rebuild itself with all the dust and the clouds or whatever, if you destroyed enough of it that it destroyed its structure and it couldn't function anymore, like walk or anything, it would explode. And its main way of being dealt with was underbarrel grenade launchers, shotguns, explosions, stuff like that. It would kill them instantly. I think it's a really cool gimmick, you know? In a really sci-fi game, I don't think we've ever really seen a concept of a dust or, like, you know, wind monster that had, like, you know, sentience. I think that's why I think it's really interesting, you know? Like a whole clump of dust with sentience. It sounds dumb on paper, but the way it looks in concept art is really cool. I would really look forward to seeing this in the game. The Mosu Colam, or the Brain Destroyer, quote unquote, is another variant of the controller, though this one functioned a little differently. It would shoot psi waves or psi bolts similar to the controller, but when it would see the player, it would grow its skull and its brain would get bigger, it would start glowing, and it would start floating in the air somehow. And its main gimmick, opposed to the controller, is instead of, you know, psi illusions, its version of psi illusions was mental deterioration. So you'd see characters killing themselves, or characters getting attacked, or their deaths would replay in front of you, or you'd see visions of enemies attacking you. I think we already have that in the game. Maybe that's what that was hinting towards. But it would drain your sanity, not like, you know, psi illusions where you just see a random stalker shooting at you, you go to loot it, and it fades away. It's a cool concept, but this one performed a little differently. Another thing to note about this mutant is it seemed to adopt an absent feature of the controller, where once it throws its Cybele at you, it would turn your camera in a different direction, at least around 180 degrees. It would just disorient you. So it seems it would have adopted that, since the controller doesn't have it anymore, which is pretty cool, I guess. The Stomatic, or the dentist, the name was never really, you know, confirmed. It's only just nicknames. This was another mutant that was just another mutation, though its main gripe is its head was full of teeth. So it would kind of act as armor. Maybe it was immune to headshots. But apparently, its main thing was that it would somehow shoot teeth at the player. That, or it would take teeth and just throw them at the player. We don't really know much about this mutant other than its attacks. But yeah, it's another attempt at a ranged mutant, which is, it's kind of cool. And it would honestly be kind of horrifying to see, Imagine you're going down the burnt forest or, Malachite, and you just see this random thing limping towards you with like a whole mouth of just teeth, and it just like randomly just spits a whole like tooth at you like a bullet or a clump of them. It's kind of cool. Now we don't know if it's either a mutation or an experiment. I don't know why the hell Project X would create this fucking thing, but it's a concept. With this next mutant, now I'm gonna be honest. Every game has its concepts phase, Stalker had like that weird warlock mutant that didn't really seem to fit in the game. Every game has those, and I kind of think this is one of those mutants where it's just not really meant to go past the concept phase. This mutant is pretty much just a controller that is conjoined with another controller, and it was just to be known as twins. Maybe it would do twice the damage, maybe it'd be a cool mutant that you'd see only once in the trilogy. It's a cool concept, but I don't think it's really worth all the game data to add a whole other mutant into the game, because UE5 already has enough problems with storage and stuff like that, and CPU usage or GPU usage. I don't know any of that, and yeah, this probably would tank it quite a bit. This next mutant doesn't really have a name at all. It's simply known as X-Lab Mutant or Mutation. And it has the same gimmick as the Filnic or Dust Monster, where you just shoot it in different parts and it would slowly deteriorate, and then once its structure is destroyed, the mutant dies. So it doesn't really have anything notable about it other than it's just in the X-Labs. So I think it might have been recycled to be the Visiograph, face or something similar, or for psi hallucinations, maybe even for the subtle zone or subtle matter thing that Faust shows you in the middle of the game. So that's pretty much it for that. For our first cut weapon, we have the Leisha or Leica. It pretty much was a modified TOZ-34, but it was with a longer rifle barrel, or it was, fixed with a rifle barrel or extended. And its main thing was you couldn't use buckshot with it, only slug shells or other. I don't know much about shotgun calibers or gauges. So it was a sport hunting rifle that was used to hunt fake giants or false giants, which is pretty strange, as maybe these giants, these other mutants that were cut, had some sort of value in the zone and were hunted for sport. So it's a cool concept, but it's pretty much just another shotgun. Now, we don't really know whether to call this weapon cut or, in the game. As it's in the game, it's just unusable as an actual weapon, though you could say it is usable, because I don't really know if it's a different model or it's just a reskin, but it's just an AK. So, hey, I guess it's just a different skin. Maybe we'll get it in the future. Maybe once mod support comes in, be able to mod it into the game. So, the model's in the game. Now, for this next one, I'm going to pretty much bunch these two weapons in the same category. As one of them, I could just knock it out, as we don't really have an image for it. We only have an image for the RPD, and the strange thing about the RPD is that it was in the game in several places, most notably Owl's shop. It's in the gun rack, but for some reason during, I think, patch 1.4 or one of those patches, when they started teasing new weapons coming to the game, that weapon just vanished mysteriously. So hey, we don't know if maybe next week we get 1.5 and boom, there's a RPD in the game. So it was probably cut either from time constraints or just because With a 64-kilometer map, like big ass map, Stalker 2, you don't really have to code in the weapon. You have to figure out where the hell it spawns, and that's going to be a whole long process. I'm pretty sure that's why a lot of stuff is really rare to see in the game, you know, because the map is big as hell. So there's probably a few places that, you know, they are, like, let's say, like, there's 3 different spawn points, but nobody could find them because the map's so big. So there's that, and then you got the RPK, which it's hinted at, though we don't have any confirmation. The only thing we have for confirmation is in the 2 new weapons teas, there was a drawing of an RPK, but it's just a drawing of a Kalashnikov style rifle, so it could be fucking anything. I honestly don't really care for either. I just really want my Obocon or AN-94 back. I fucking love that weapon, and it's a shame that we don't see it in the game. I don't really like that we only have like around like 2 or 3 Kalashnikov style weapons, but hey, at least we got some, and at least the Zuber PP Bison is pretty cool. I'm also going to bunch in these next 2 in the same category because we might see them in patch 1.5, and that is the quote-unquote 3-line rifle or the Mosu Colam. That or some Italian or Chinese clone of it. That and then the Cora, which is the 1911 clone. So those 2 weapons we're probably getting in the game. We don't know if they were, you know, cut. They probably were cut. That or they just didn't have enough time to put them in and now we're getting them in. But for the time being, they're cut. So all we know is that they're both early game weapons. This doesn't count as a weapon, but it's equipment, so I'm throwing this in as well, as it's the only one. This is a cut detector called the OSO Detector, or OSO Detector, I don't remember. I'll put the name up while I'm editing this. But it was essentially a detector created by Dr. Dahlin himself, and the main gimmick with this detector is you could actually see artifacts, and that's why there's that little hole. Looking at it, it seems to be mixed with Svarog detector or Velez detector, you know, combination of those 2, that along with the hole that you could see through. So for the time being, it's cut. We don't know if it's going to be added soon. It probably will. I think it would be really fucking dumb to add it in as, you know, paid content. After, you know, the pre-orders, I have a huge feeling that we're going to get another sort of thing like that. I would be really mad if they created some sort of season pass. I don't even want to think about that, but hey, at least we know that this thing exists and that we're probably going to be getting it soon. It's a cool concept, and it's even in the Stalker art book. The way I take it, if it's in the art book, we're probably getting it. As why the hell would you even put it in the game if, or not, you put it in the book if it's not going to be in the game. Now, this next segment, I'm going to have to be really careful with what I say, as a lot of this is attributed to leaks. Though it's very interesting, and we might get it in the future, hopefully. So, you know, and if an article is able to show the damn thing, I don't think I should really be able to, you know, have too much of a problem explaining a little bit, as long as I don't show the whole damn thing, you know, like design documents. So we'll start off simple. A cut thing, sort of an area, not really. It's more of an anomaly. That area between the cordon and the Zaton area. So, you know, that railway thing that's blocked off, which used to lead to the Darkscape back in the OG trilogy. Apparently, that gap was supposed to be inaccessible, but it was an anomalous thunderstorm, so it would constantly be raining horribly, and that's the reason why stalkers don't cross there. It's a cool concept, but I guess they just didn't have time to put it in. This next entry, let's hope this video doesn't get taken down for it, but apparently Duga was going to be way bigger, and it was going to be a very anomalous area. There was going to be either burning villages or overgrown villages with, you know, anomalies like the vine anomaly that used to be in Pripyat, stuff like that. Along with the fact that Doctor's hut was not going to be in the Red Forest originally, where the Mirage is. I think it's a stupid fucking place. Originally, it was going to be behind the Duga in his own place. And I think it's really cool. It's a shame the area got cut. And, it seems really promising from, what was shown in the images and the documents. Though, it was really ambitious, so I understand that they didn't have any time to put it in. I feel like that big switch to UE5 is really what, made things really difficult. Adapting to a new engine, having to transport all those previous assets onto it. So, we could assume it was made during the early stages, though we don't have confirmation. Now, the Iron Forest, we can't really call it cut because, it's in the game. We can't access it, but it's almost finished. It's just, it needs to be fully implemented. But the Iron Forest is the area under the CNPP. It's currently blocked off for the time being. It's horribly radioactive if you try to go to it. Even if you no-clip to it, there's not really much there. Just a few anomalies, like electric anomalies. Though, from what we could see in the concept art, it seems to be a very dangerous place. A lot of gravity anomalies. Hopefully, judging by the concept art, we might get a new anomaly type, magnetic anomalies. I think it would fit in really well. We're going to get gravity anomalies, electric anomalies. We could get a shit ton of anomalies. That plus, it'd probably be pretty interesting to see more spatial anomalies. And I'm going to segue this into another thing. This might be a DLC thing, so I don't want to be, 100% on this. But there are mentions of several spatial anomalies, or spatial bubbles. There is even one far out in the top right corner of the map. Hopefully me mentioning this doesn't get the video striked or taken down. But yeah, there's apparently a spatial anomaly far away over there. Probably similar to like how the debug testing area is super far away. Imagine that, but it's a whole area that you're going to be stuck in. That's far out of the map. It's pretty cool. Another thing I want to quickly mention it now, as I missed it. The Duga area was also supposed to have a crash plane, the same plane we saw in that Stalker 2 hand-drawn map. We're supposed to be able to see it there. Why it's there, I don't know. I don't know why the hell a plane would be flying over the zone. My guess is just chalk it up to a spatial anomaly. That would probably be a cool story, like a plane was just flying, think about like the Malaysia Airlines that disappeared. Something like that, and the answer to that, it was a spatial anomaly, took it to the zone, and it's just there. That's pretty cool, I guess. Another area worth mentioning is the whole Jupiter factory, and that area around it, there's also the Oasis area, the ventilation complex, stuff like that. It's all cut for now. There's not really anything too interesting other than the fact that from no clipping to the Jupiter factory, you could see a lot more underground areas. There might be the workshops that the Gauss rifle was created in. That or some sort of underground labyrinth would probably be pretty cool. That plus apparently the bitumen anomaly has been expanded like a lot. Like it's a giant ravine that's taken like a tiny bit of the whole factory. So that's pretty cool. Another thing to note is the entire northern part of Pripyat. It was cut out for time, but it was apparently going to have a lot. There was going to be the pool, the infamous pool that we saw in Modern Warfare. There was even like a bar that we would have been able to see. There was a lot of Pripyat that was cut out, sadly. And it's a shame, Pripyat's a really cool area. It just sucks that it tanks the fuck out of my game on the frame rate side. But, it's a pretty cool area. It's a shame we didn't get to see all of it, like the stadium, stuff like that. Another thing to note about northern Pripyat is there's Kadaavver. I don't remember how the fuck to pronounce it. I'm gonna see it while I'm editing. But there's basically that whole village that seems to be some sort of importance. Maybe it's around the Belarusian side of the zone, but it's above that area, as we can see through the leaked documents. But I don't really consider that content. It's just worth mentioning. It might honestly be something we see in either the Sandy Plateau DLC, that or the Secret of Lamance DLC. So, it's anyone's guess for now. Now, these two segments aren't really cut content. I just want to mention them, even though it might be pretty iffy for me to talk about. I think it's worth mentioning as there's literally fucking nobody who's been talking about any of this. But I want to talk a bit about the two DLCs that haven't really been named, which is Cold Island and Sandy Plateau. I haven't seen anyone talk about Sandy Plateau, and I think it's a really cool concept. So, Cold Island, we've seen a pretty bunch of it. We've got posters of it, concept art. We even pretty much know where it's going to be. There's even like a few mentioned, there's going to be like a shitload of artifacts that are from there. But we know that might also come with the North Perimeter, as there's two possible entrances to Cold Island. There is the strange checkpoint that isn't really named at all on the map near the cemetery and the perimeter dam around the cooling towers. That, and above the Circa area, there was apparently the North Perimeter, which was like a really weird area. Apparently it was the original abandoned area where, the scientists or the government was keeping their HQ at. So take of that what you will. But, that's where Cold Island's going to be. It's not too big, but we know it's an island. It's more, it's going to be really coast-like is what I can say. I don't want to, just straight up put images of it or describe it of what it looks like on the leaked documents, but it's, it's not really an island, it's, if you look at the Pripyat River, you'll see what it's like, but it's, it's very long. There's going to be a lot of coasts. I think it's going to be pretty interesting. Now, the Sandy Plateau, no one has really spoken a word about this, and it kind of makes me nervous for this video. But I think it's the coolest DLC out of all of them. Because, snow DLCs, you go, shit, well, snow, watch how modern, turn the whole game to snow anyways. And then Lamance, oh shit, it's Lamance. Hopefully we get to explore the whole area of Lamance. We didn't get to explore much, we just got a linear path of what it was. And it's a really cool concept of a ghost town, but Sandy Plateau is pretty much the Belarusian side of the zone, the northern. I might be wrong on that, so, if I am wrong on that, don't, witch hunt me over it. I'm just going off memory. But basically, the gimmick with, I've been saying gimmick a lot, the whole gripe with Sandy Plateau is that it's more of like a desert or a sand dune. We have a lot of concept art from the Stalker 2 art book about it, and it looks really cool in my opinion. The anomalies seemed, ghost or spirit-like, and I really like that concept for Stalker 2. One thing people fail to realize is there's a lot of different cultures and ethnic diversities in that area of the world. There's a mix of, Ukraine and Russia, and then there's the Middle East, and there's Asia and Europe, stuff like that. And we've seen a bit of, European ethnicities. There's Bob the Foreigner in Zalicia, who's got a French accent, and I know there's a shitload of other guys like that. But there's no one really from the Middle East, and I feel like that's what Stalker 2's take of it is going to be, the Sandy Plateau. As from the concept art, it seems to look a lot like the Middle East. And I think it's really cool, imagine like a Varan suit, or like just a long Stalker cloak, just climbing or like about a desert, and imagine the desert's like cold or something, it's pretty, deserts at night are pretty fucking cold. So think of it like that, and I think it's a really cool concept. Imagine the anomalies. There's also worth mentioning the concept art of that strange whirlpool. We don't know where that's going to be. We know there's going to be a lot of, coastal or like watery areas around Cold Island and Sandy Plateau. So it's worth thinking about, I'm really excited for these two DLCs, mainly for the anomalies, as I don't remember where, I can't find the post, but I remember someone mentioning on a Reddit post that there were a shitload of arch anomalies that were cut. There's only 6 in the game right now. I could assume there was plans for more, but we just don't have them. But apparently there were a shitload more of arch anomalies, and we could see that in the concept art, though they're not in the game, and I cannot wait to see that, because I think arc anomalies are the coolest concepts ever, like that tornado one, or the fire whirl. Another cool thing to mention, the fire whirl Now, I'm not 100% on this. It originally was a grapevine, or a vine, or plant anomaly. And, you know, thank God they changed it. That was pretty fucking lame. So, you know, Fireworld, that I'm going to be honest, that's my favorite anomaly out of all of them. But, you know, we're going to have to wait to see, you know, time has to tell. The only thing that sucks is I'm pretty much making this video out of, you know, I'm pretty much going insane with how much of a lack of content there is, honestly. You know, I'm gonna get those few comments that are like, you know, just shut the fuck up and play the game. I've gotten a few of those already, trying to like make a point. But hey, I've got my opinions. You know, when I've got 175 fucking hours in the game. You know, now I'm at a point where like, okay, I'm seeing the same shit over and over again. It's a cool game, but I'm looking at this concept art and I'm like, this is really fucking cool. Why can't I have this right now? And you just have to respect that, you know. It sucks on both ends, but at least we know that time will tell. Let's just hope GSC is a little more transparent about it, as you know, it keeps the community engaged. You know, there's a lot of things like that where if a development studio updates the community more, it keeps them intrigued, and then the fan base grows and grows. You saw that shit with Yandere Simulator. The game's not finished, and it's still popular. Well, not really anymore, but it was, oh my god, it was so popular. So I think it's a good practice to do, as long as you know, serve that, or, you know, bring what's promised, if you know what I'm saying. So that's my take on the whole thing. You know, I would love to hear you guys' thoughts. This is a topic that I don't really see people talk about at all. I don't know why. I think it's just the community has been really divided at this point in time, so people haven't really been talking about it. But I'm just gonna put my foot down and let's hope some good comes out of it. I would really love to see your points on this. You know, what do you guys think? If there's anything I missed for cut locations, or if there's anything I should talk about after this, maybe make a part 2 to this if we find some more stuff, or maybe, you know, some, you know, like, you know, check out my other videos if they decide to take this one fucking down. I don't blame them, you know, it's their game, their artwork. I'll just take it as a sign. I'll just, you know, shut my mouth. You know, enough of me yapping. Thank you for watching. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm making this video really quickly, honestly, because I am planning another part of my Stalker ARG, and that's taking quite a bit. It's going to be more action-packed this time, so I think you guys will enjoy that for the few 200 people that have seen it, or 124 people, I don't remember the amount. So to those people, don't worry, there's more content on the way coming on that side. But that's it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm out of breath and thirsty, and I hope you guys have a nice day.